What's going on, folks? Welcome to another edition of the TKO Talk NBA preview. It's becoming a yearly tradition that you all look forward to, just like the beginning of the NBA season. We're about 10 days from tip-off, and there's a lot to discuss. We're going to try to keep it a little shorter than most years, the typical 9 hours that we usually do. But joining me, of course, you know me, I'm TKO Tim, the captain of this program, headed by my first mate, my usual partner in crime, my PIC, none other than my boy Rob. Say hi to the people, Rob.
What's going on, everybody?
So we're going to, instead of ranking teams 1 through 30 or whatever we did the first year, I don't remember, we're just going to go by division, and we're going to specify whether or not it's a playoff team, a lottery team, or a championship contender. And let's get it started. We're going to start out low. Even though we're not ranking teams, this would probably be the last one on our rankings, and that would be the Philadelphia 76ers. In the offseason, they traded for Carl Landry and Nick Stauskas and also Jason Thompson in a Kings salary dump. They ended up trading Jason Thompson back to the Warriors. They signed Kendall Marshall, of course, formerly of your Los Angeles Lakers, to a 4-year deal, despite him projected to miss this year due to injury. And they also drafted Jahlil Okafor, number 2 overall. So the big story with this team is, of course, the Tankapalooza. It's been going on for quite some time now. And they ended up with Jahlil Okafor, who looks like he's going to get anywhere from 20 to 30 touches a night. And he's going to be a big part of their offense and try to make some sort of inside-out game, maybe with Stauskas and whatever point guard they end up trotting out. I guess Isaiah Cannon's still there from the trade they made with Houston last year. Carl Landry's going to be a decent veteran to have, but, I mean, it is what it is with this team. It's still tanking, and they're going to still hope to get that franchise-changing superstar, and possibly Jahlil Okafor is that. Nerlens Noel played well for them last year. He's going to move over to the 4, I guess. There's some spacing issues there. Ultimately, they're going to win no more than 20 games, and another painful year for Sixers fans. Is Allen Iverson on the waiver wire for them to pick up is the big question. No, I'm just kidding.
That's the only way I'll watch a Sixers game this year.
I was thinking this the other day when I saw Ben Gordon get released by the Warriors, is they should just, they had Jason Richardson last year. They should just sign some grizzled veteran every year and have him take
That's their gimmick?
Have him take 20 shots a game. I'd like to see Ben Gordon just try and score 50 every night, because at least it'd be more entertaining than watching, Robert Covington and Hollis Thompson. But I'm curious to see how the Okafor dynamic works out with. Literally just
Nerlens?
with Nerlens.
It's always fun to watch two big guys play together when they're talented.
Yeah, and I just don't know. Nerlens still seems like a 5 to me. Because he doesn't have much of a jump shot, but we'll see. This is not a team we should be focusing too much attention on. The Boston Celtics is the next team up. They traded for David Lee, Perry Jones in the offseason, both on expiring deals. They signed Amir Johnson, formerly of the Raptors, to a 2-year deal. They signed Jay Crowder to a 5-year deal who they picked up in the Rondo trade with the Mavericks last year. They signed Jonas Jerebko to a 2-year deal. And then they drafted Terry Rozier and Jordan Mickey in the first round. Wasn't a big fan of the draft picks. Seems kind of like redundant positions of need for them. They have about 13 point guards. They didn't really seem to need another one. Marcus Smart had an up and down rookie year. You definitely saw flashes of something. But this team is kind of built like a ace seed, and they're going to hope that their young guys develop and maybe make a big trade if they can. If one, pops up, if Kevin Love and the Cavs don't end up working out and they can, move David Lee's deal or something, they're always looking to do something. And Brad Stevens is a good enough coach to make whatever they put on the floor work, and I think that's just kind of how they're going to play this one out.
I think they'll be hovering right around the 8th seed. I agree with that 100%. Good coaching, and they play hard-nosed ball. So, and the East is always down, so there's always a chance.
Yeah. A lot of good players, not a lot of great players. David Lee's probably going to get a lot of touches for them as they, don't really have a go-to scorer, I guess, unless it's Isaiah Thomas, which is a whole nother issue. But it's just a lot of good players, and they'll get good production, and they won't be a disaster. There will be some nights where they just can't score, and they'll get blown out by 40. And then there will be those other times where they beat teams they probably shouldn't beat. So, watchable, I guess. That's about it. So,
Watchable, Jace.
Watchable, Jace, for sure. Speaking of watchable, Jace, the New York Knicks are up next. Made a lot of moves this offseason. They basically have an entirely new team as they signed Robin Lopez, Aaron Aflalo, Derek Williams, Kyle O'Quinn, Kevin Serafin. Former Laker great Sasa Vujacic is on the squad in his championship ring. Did he win 2 or just the 1?
I think it was just the 1. I think they got rid of him.
Oh, that's too bad. Clearly that's why they didn't win more.
Oh no, he had to be there because he was the one that made the free throws at the end of the Celtics one. So he had to be there for the...
Well, there you go. So he's on the bench. They drafted Kristaps Porzingis, of course, and Jerian Grant in the first round. They picked up that first round pick from the Hawks, I believe, when they traded Tim Hardaway Jr., who really didn't seem to develop much and was more of just a volume shooter, which they didn't need when you have Carmelo Anthony on your team. This looks more like a legitimate NBA team than last year. You could see how the pieces would fit. Robin Lopez, the kind of rim protector. Aaron Aflalo, the defensive three-point shooter. Obviously focused around Carmelo, but Jose Calderon getting the dudes the ball where they need it. Derek Williams just kind of pick and rolling and cutting and getting easy layups and dunks. Maybe hitting some three-pointers, and then Kyle O'Quinn and Kevin Serafin being solid backup 4s and 5s. So, in theory, it's a decent team. There are just teams I like better in the East, and I think they miss out on the playoffs, and I think this is the year where they actually have legitimate pieces where you get to see just how bad of a coach Derek Fisher is. Because I think a lot of people blame the roster last year and Melo's injury and such. It just, every time I watch Derek Fisher, and being in Connecticut, we watch a lot of Knicks games because they're the quote-unquote local team. He looked like he had no idea what he was doing and he was learning on the job, so maybe he improves after going through a season, but he really looks clueless. He just, doesn't know, he doesn't even seem to be talking. It seems to be more that Kurt Rambis and Melo are coaching the team, and he's just kind of looking out for Matt Barnes out of the corner of his eye. But one thing I will say is I think the Kristaps drafting is a big talking point for Knicks fans. I have a great video on my phone of our friend Trin reacting to them drafting Kristaps Porzingis, and let me just say, I cannot repeat that on a family podcast. But if he turns out to be Dirk Nowitzki, it'll be an all-time draft steal. If he turns out to be one of the other million European players that don't work out, it'll be another...
par for the course.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be
the New York Knicks.
It'll be just one other Knicks season. Derek Williams has looked really good in preseason, I will say that. I've always liked him. I thought he should have been better coming out of college, out of Arizona. I liked him a lot coming out that year, and he's just been kind of a disaster. He got traded 3 or 4 times already. Maybe he seems to finally have gained some confidence and kind of figured out what his role is, and he could be a good player for this team. Playoffs or no playoffs, that seems to be the topic of discussion for the Knicks.
I don't know. I definitely like this team better than last year, but I'm going to have to see a little bit of Derek Fisher a little more this year. Last year was just a disaster, but that's, his first year coaching, and they really didn't have a good team, so I guess that was par for the course. But I think if last year wasn't just a wash like we think it was, if he actually learned something from it, and him and Phil have talked a little more in the off season, him, Rambis, Phil, they all get together, then I think they can fight for the 8th spot. I'm gonna say no right now, though, not making the playoffs.
Yeah, thumbs down.
Close.
Thumbs down for me. Playoff adjacent. We move on to the Great White North, where the Toronto Raptors have signed DeMar Carroll, Corey Joseph, Luis Scola, Bismack Biyombo, and former number one overall pick Anthony Bennett, who's already on his third team. Not so well. Good job, Cavaliers. I guess it worked out for them. They also they drafted, DeLon Wright, brother of Darrell Wright, who I'm not quite sure why isn't on an NBA roster, but I've always liked him. They're just kind of replacing their former small forward, who I can't remember, Terrence Ross. They drafted him early in the first round a couple years ago. They're just kind of replacing him. He was decent last year. He always seems to show flashes, but he can't quite put it together. He hasn't really developed much, so they signed DeMar Carroll to kind of play that role a little bit better, to play off of DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry. And I think it's a very good starting five. They gave Jonas Valanciunas an extension. Patrick Patterson probably moves into that starting role now that Amir Johnson is gone. Amir Johnson did a lot of things for them, so they're going to miss him. They got to hope that Valanciunas develops a little bit more in this, I believe, his fourth year now. And he's got to be the rim protector. He's got to be the roller in pick and roll scenarios. He's got to be the defensive anchor. And they don't really need him to score in the low post, but if they got that, that would be an added bonus for sure. And then Patrick Patterson is gonna stretch the floor, and Luis Scola can kind of be that, do the dirty work kind of guy in relief of him. So I like the starting five. The bench is iffy. It depends how Terrence Ross takes to that bench role. Corey Joseph was a guy that the Spurs made look really good. I'm not 100% sold on that signing. They gave him a lot of money.
That could have been the system.
It definitely could have been the system.
We gotta wait and see on him.
There's always those flags with Spurs players. One thing I will say is that Kyle Lowry lost a lot of weight in the offseason. Looks really, really good. He always starts the season well, it seems like, and then kind of tapers off. He was a mess in the playoffs last year. He was also injured, but they need him to be the all-star that he was early on in the season for them to really go anywhere.
Being in better shape could definitely cure that not having enough gas in the tank towards the end of the season.
Yeah, that could have played a role. He could have just lost steam, because this was really the first time he carried a team for the full season, and DeMar DeRozan was in and out due to injury also. He's another all-star caliber guy that they're going to have to rely on. It's really that backcourt and whatever they can get from Valanciunas. Like, what you're getting with DeMar Carroll. That's why they paid him. You get three-point shooting, you get defense, you get hustle, you get a smart basketball player that knows his role. And those guys are worth a lot of money these days, and that's why they paid him, $13.5 million per year for the next 4. Good coached, well coached, good home field, home crowd, I should say. And I think they're in the playoffs once again, probably toward the 7 or 6 seed.
Definitely agree. I like the off-season pickups. I think they may even be fighting a little higher. They may be in that, that 5, looking to, if they could get home court advantage in the playoffs, that would be huge. If they have a really good year, especially with some of the injuries of the other teams, if they could sneak into the 4 spot, they could look to, go deeper in the playoffs this year.
And that's definitely the team's goal, I would say, and why you sign a guy like DeMar Carroll, so we could play someone like LeBron or Joe Johnson, who beat them up in the playoffs pretty good a couple years ago, or Jimmy Butler, or these guys that are going to stand in their way in the playoffs, Dwayne Wade.
That Razor Ramon, Luis Scola signing, that's big. I like him and Biyombo. I think they both come in, they play their role right, and partnering him with Carroll, DeMar DeRozan's just exciting to watch, so I definitely think they're a team that they're going to be better than last year. I think they made the right moves. They're definitely heading in the right direction.
We move on to, I mentioned Joe Johnson bouncing them in the playoffs, and we move on to his team, the Brooklyn Nets, who undergoes continuous change seemingly throughout year to year. They went from spending all that money to try to win a championship to now kind of in somewhat rebuild mode, I guess. They re-signed Brook Lopez to a big deal. He's definitely now the focus of that team. They signed Shane Larkin, who had a pretty good year for the Knicks last year, Wayne Ellington, Andrea Bargnani, Trent's favorite player, Thomas Robinson, Willie Reed, who was the NBA Summer League MVP, I believe. and they also drafted Rondé Hollis Jefferson. Solid team. I think they're going to be in the kind of 8 seed discussion. They're going to be fighting for that 8 seed. They're going to just kind of see whether or not they have to just go full on tank mode and just try to pick up draft picks and move toward the future, or they have to, kind of do what the Bucks did a couple years ago and just kind of grit their teeth and accept the fact that they're a perennial 8 seed. I like the kind of build around the Brook Lopez kind of team that they have. They have shooters with Ellington, with Jared Jack, with Joe Johnson. Shane Larkin is a pretty good guy at just getting the ball where it needs to go. He's not going to light up the world, but he's still a young player. He's still developing. And then Thad Young and Thomas Robinson, I think, play off Brook Lopez pretty well. The problem is what happens when Brook Lopez inevitably gets injured and they have to rely on Andrea Bargnani and Willie Reed, and their offense just disappears in a way. Lionel Hollins is a good coach, so I think he'll maintain whatever kind of mediocrity this team has in store. But not a team I'm getting excited about, but a team that isn't a joke by any means. Just kind of somewhere in that middle ground.
I agree with you 100%. Love Hollins as a coach, and I think they're just a team that'll give you a good game every night, and in the East could definitely will be in the playoff picture.
We'll disagree on one of these, I'm sure. When he decides to rep the Pistons again, and we have to disagree, that might be it.
Yeah, 3-1-3.
We moved to that division, the East Central. Chicago Bulls basically just keeping their team status quo. They re-signed Mike Dunleavy, Jimmy Butler. They gave a huge deal to, appropriately enough, who's becoming one of the top 15 to 20 players in the league. Aaron Brooks they re-signed, who was a solid backup. They drafted Bobby Portis, who looks pretty good, another power forward to add to their platoon. And the biggest move, obviously, was firing longtime coach Tom Thibodeau and replacing him with, I believe, the Iowa State coach last year, Fred Hoiberg. I just think even if Fred Hoiberg is a downgrade, there's enough talent here to where you're going to be a top 5 seed as long as you don't get crippled with injuries. I mean, whenever I'm talking about this team going into a season, I'm basically writing off Derrick Rose already. It's like, all right, well, do you have enough backup point guards to at least maintain where you were going to be otherwise? And I think they do. Aaron Brooks and Kirk Heinrich are decent. Jimmy Butler handles the ball enough to where you don't need a typical point necessarily. Pau Gasol's good enough of a passer to make up for that. Joakim Noah's good enough of a passer to make up for that. You have Doug McDermott in year 2. Hopefully he'll improve. And then you also have the idea that if Bobby Portis is good enough, Taj Gibson is potentially expendable. And even though I think he's a really good player, and he's always a dude that kills the heat, so I would love them to get rid of him. He'd be valuable to another team if they want to go out and get another piece, whether it's a small forward or another point guard or whatever, a 6-man like a Jamal Crawford type. They could definitely move him for something, and I think the Clippers would actually really think about that. A Crawford for Gibson trade. There'd probably have to be some picks and other pieces involved, but I mean, this is a team that scares me every year in the East, and it continues to do so.
Yeah, they're too talented, obviously, to miss the playoffs. They'll be fighting for home court. Just with this team, it's injuries. Imagine if Derrick Rose can play a whole season, what they can be like.
I don't want to.
Granted, new coach and all that, but they're still talented, and I like what you just said about Taj Gibson. He could be very valuable if Portis comes in and gives them what they think he's going to. They can get a scorer for the nights they're inevitably going to score 60 points.
Yep. They
can trade for someone, a 6th man to, make some buckets. That'll make them an even more dangerous team. Playoffs for sure, though.
Yeah, playoffs for sure. I think probably a top 5 seed.
Look for him to lose to the Cavs in the playoffs again at some point.
Yeah, Joakim Noah's career highlight is going to be lost to LeBron in the playoffs every year. The Milwaukee Bucks are next, and this is a team that I'm planting my flag in. They're one of my They're one of my sleepers this year. I really, really like what they did. They signed Greg Monroe, who I think is a valuable asset if used properly. I didn't like the way he was being used with the Pistons. I think he's a typical back to the basket scoring center. Defense is always going to be an issue, but him and Drummond were never going to work together. And I said that last year. I said that 2 years ago, and that's why I was off the Pistons bandwagon, despite, all the additions and hiring Van Gundy and such. He's now in a team where he can play back to the basket. He can play true center. You could dump it to him and get buckets. And they re-signed John Henson to play power forward next to him, who's a defensive-minded shot blocker, rebounder to play off of him. It's like a Serge Ibaka, Enes Kanter type of thing, to where what one lacks, the other makes up for. They also re-signed Chris Middleton, who had a great year last year, a kind of long, small forward shooting guard type, really good from long range. They signed him to a big deal. He's one of those types of guys like DeMar Carroll who are going to be really valuable. The kind of 3 and D guys, 3-point shooting and defense, that is, not the Dudley Death Drop. They also signed Chris Copeland, who's a decent bench guy. They traded for Gravis Vasquez, who was on the Raptors, had a couple good years there. And Jason Kidd, now in year 3 as a head coach, year 3 as a head coach, year 2 with the Bucks. And I really like the squad going from 1 through 5. I mean, Michael Carter-Williams is still growing. You got Chris Middleton at the 2. You got Giannis Antetokounmpo, who continues to improve at
Let's
the 3.
be honest. That's why you like this team. You like saying his name.
I love me some Greek Freak. You got, and then the 4 spot is interesting. You got probably Jabari Parker playing some stretch 4, and then you got John Henson kind of playing that defensive role. So whatever kind of team they're playing, if they're playing the Cavs and they got LeBron at the 4, they can play Jabari at the 4 and get away with it. Or if you're playing a big team like the Bulls, necessarily, you can play Henson and Monroe together. I just really like how well the pieces fit. It's a long, defensive-minded team. I think Kidd is the right coach for the young players. And I really like them. I think they could challenge for a top 5 seed. They're definitely a playoff team to me. It's just a matter of how high can they go. That's not even taking into consideration the development of these young guys like Jabari, like Middleton, and Michael Carter-Williams.
Surprisingly, I am going to agree with you, and that's not just for the sake of us agreeing. But when I was looking through, I thought we were going to do our rankings, 1 through last. I picked this as one of the 8 playoff teams in the East. And looking at the roster, just going through it right now, I really like their starting 5, and I like some of their bench pieces. And, I mean, they played well last year. They didn't even have Jabari,
Yeah.
I'm really interested to see him coming back from the injury. If he's close, he's so young. If he's close to 100%, if rehab went well, like we think it did, I think they're going to be even better. And like you said, what, fighting for a home court?
Yeah, potentially top 5 seed. I mean, if the Bulls get hurt, the Cavs are definitely are winning the division for sure. But
I could definitely see them not fighting for the 4.
I mean, the East is such a coin flip, really. It just depends on health, and the Hawks are probably going to regress. The Wizards still have a bad coach.
They definitely got better at Milwaukee.
For sure.
They're definitely one of the teams you can say that about.
Just by adding Greg Monroe is enough. And they're keeping all their young guys together. They're all developing and they're all playing together well. And there's really no cancers in that locker room unless you really hate OJ Mayo. All right, we're moving on to the Cleveland Cavaliers. One of the title contenders for sure. They re-signed pretty much all their guys. Kevin Love, J.R. Smith, Amon Shumpert, Matthew Dellavedova, playoff hero.
The Curry stopper, right? Everyone says?
The Curry stopper.
Yeah, how'd that go?
Not well. James Jones is back for year 103. Timothy Mozgov is back.
James Jones is the best garbage time player in the league, let's be honest.
It's true.
Not that he can't do anything else, but
he hit some
just
threes.
steps it up.
He hit some threes when it was necessary. Like, he's an actual NBA player, which the Cavs desperately needed last year. They had about 7.
He's a good 3-point shooter when he gets time.
Yeah, they played him at
he just
stretch.
doesn't get any run.
They played him at stretch 4 last year, and they had a lot of injuries, so they had to. But I mean, he wasn't terrible. He wasn't the reason they lost by any means. They also signed Richard Jefferson. Speaking of guys that have been in the league forever, Austin Day, and I think the biggest signing is the signing of Mo Williams, who had a really good year last year, kind of under the radar for the Hornets and the Timberwolves. He actually put up 52 in some game last year, I think. So any guy that's capable of that is still an asset. With Kyrie's injury, his injury history, and just the lack of scoring they have off that bench, having a guy like Mo Williams, who has obviously played with LeBron for a long time, who's friends with LeBron, who knows Cleveland, I think that was a great signing, and he's going to be very valuable to this team. I mean, any of these guys that are real NBA players are going to be helpful because you need to rest LeBron at critical times in the season so he could be ready for the postseason and more specifically ready for the finals, because we saw he could handle that load but only to a certain degree. And if you put Mo Williams, Richard Jefferson, Austin Day, and Jared Cunningham, who's having a pretty good preseason, on that finals team, maybe they win, because they were really only a couple men short. The gap between them and the Warriors wasn't that big. It was just the workload, the lack of minutes, and just the lack of rest. I mean, you could literally see dudes wearing down as the finals went on, and it was pretty depressing as a dude that is a fan of LeBron. He has more help, and that's really all you can ask.
Yeah, obviously, I think they're the favorite in the East. I like all the signings, especially the Mo Williams one, for all the reasons you touched on. Nice homecoming, and with the healthy Varejao,
That's true.
I don't see why you could put them as anything but the favorite in the East.
That's almost like getting a whole new guy back. I mean, we don't know. With as many injuries as he's had, he's not going to be the same guy he was 3 or 4 years ago when he was like almost a borderline all-star. But he's another body. He's another dude to help.
And let's be honest, around the trade deadline, they're going to be active. Everyone wants to come play with LeBron, and management will do anything they can to get him those guys. So we may be looking at a team that's not even half as good as they're going to be come trade deadline.
Yeah, especially considering Tristan Thompson is, in theory, not going to show up until he has a deal. That might change when he starts missing checks, but he doesn't have a deal as of now. The Cavs have retracted all of their offers because he doesn't plan on accepting them, and this is so stupid to me. The dude's management, aka LeBron's management, just needs to realize that he is not as valuable as they think he is. Clearly he's not as valuable to the league because nobody else even bothered to try to sign him. And he's a 1.5 dimensional player at best. He's a rebounder who's decent at rim protection for his size, and that's pretty much it. He's never going to average more than 15, if that. That might be generous, and he's not a go-to guy. He's a good role player, not a great role player. He's a good role player, and he was made to look a lot better in the playoffs and the finals because they didn't have any other real NBA players. So I think he'll show up eventually, and that'll just give them even more depth and dynamics to them. We didn't really even see this team at full strength last year, if you think about it. After they made the Shumpert and JR deals, it was a very small sample size with Kyrie, Smith, Shumpert, LeBron, Love, and Mozgov. That 6, however you put those 6 pieces together, that was a very small sample size. And you had Mo Williams and Varejao and whoever else in there. It's going to be interesting, and I don't know if David Blatt is the right guy for the job still, but he's good enough. I mean, really, LeBron's the coach.
I was just going to say.
So it doesn't really matter. All right, we're moving on. We got to speed this up a little. Indiana Pacers are next. They signed Monte Ellis in a big signing this offseason. They traded for Jordan Hill. With the Lakers, they basically did a center swap between Hibbert and Jordan Hill. They traded for Chase Budinger because they need a white guy on the Indiana team. They re-signed Rodney Stuckey and Lavoy Allen, and they also drafted Miles Turner out of Texas to maybe one day step into that Roy Hibbert role. He's gonna need some time to develop for sure, but otherwise I like this team. You get Paul George back, that's really the big deal. And a Paul George Monte Ellis tandem with George Hill kind of directing traffic interests me. They're going to fight for that 8th seed. I think they will get it. I like the team. They're extremely well coached. They have a great home court. So I think they do sneak into the 8th seed. And I'm really curious to see how PG-13 comes back and pairs with Monte. It's a solid 2. About as good of a 2-3 as you're going to get in the league.
I say playoffs for sure. Definitely. When Paul George is on, man, some of the things he did in the playoffs a few years back, I'm really curious. Hopefully he can stay healthy because I want to see him play a full season now after he's already had the success and we look to him to be one of these next superstars in the coming years. I'm really curious. I say playoffs, though, for them.
All right. Detroit in the house. Detroit Pistons. They signed Reggie Jackson to a huge deal. Signed Aaron Baines to a big deal in one of the most bizarre moves of the offseason. It's like, really? That guy, that Australian dude from the Spurs? You really want to lock him up? All right. They acquired Danny Granger. They signed Ersan Ilyasova. I believe they traded for him. Steve Blake and Marcus Morris. Not to be confused with the good Morris brother, Markieff. And they also drafted Stanley Johnson out of Arizona, I believe. They, I like the matchup between the pairing of Drummond and Ersan Ilyasova. They, like I said earlier, the Monroe thing didn't really work. Drummond needs kind of space to operate so he could roll, so he could kind of stay around the rim because he has nothing outside the paint. So when you have Ersan Ilyasova who can shoot threes, it just spaces the floor, and they had when they had Anthony Tolliver on the floor with him last year, who could kind of do similar things. That's when he played the best. So when you have Ilyasova here now, I think that just gives him room to operate because this is him and Reggie Jackson's team, and that sentence alone is the reason why I do not buy them as anything other than another lottery team.
Yep, lottery for sure.
And that doesn't bode well for Stan Van Gundy. 2 straight years after they signed him to the big deal of being the coach / basketball operations / GM / popcorn vendor. I don't even know. He wears every hat there in the Palace at Auburn Hills. So, sorry, Pistons fans, you're going to have to wait one more year, if that. All right, we're moving to the Southeast. It's getting a little warmer here. Talk about
putting my jacket on.
As Rob puts his jacket on. Talk about the Orlando Magic. They have a new coach in Scott Skiles, who I guess is still a coach. They signed C.J. Watson, Jason Smith, and they re-signed Tobias Harris. One move I did like is they traded for the Heat's Shabazz Napier, who we decided to give up on after 1 year. And he's already killed us in 2 preseason games. He's hit like the game winner. So, thumbs up, Pat Riley. They also drafted one of my favorite players in the draft, Mario Hezonja. Super Mario, he's already being dubbed, and he looks like a star. So, pretty much the same story with this team, just with more pieces. A lot of young, interesting prospects, and how do they all fit? I thought Jacques Vaughn was the worst coach in the league the last couple of years, getting little to nothing out of what is a very talented core. And now you add Shabazz, Hezonja, and you re-sign Tobias Harris along with Oladipo and Peyton and Vucevic and all the other young guys they have in there. I think you're going to see an improvement from this team, but not enough of an improvement. It wouldn't surprise me if they were like sneakily a really good defense, but Aaron Gordon also comes back from injury. He's another really young guy, really good young guy who has potential, who I really like. You just need to see some development out of these guys. You need to see some development. You need to see some attention to defense. And Scott Skiles could potentially do that just because the gap between Vaughn and Skiles is probably just so big. Skiles is like a professional NBA coach and Jacque Vaughn isn't. So just that alone is probably good enough for some improvement. But they're still lottery bound to me.
Too young right now, for sure.
To you, who's like, if you could pick like, all right, future All-Star on this team, who is it? Because there's a lot of potential guys.
I like Gordon. Right now, if we're just like the closest one.
Not like this year necessarily.
Oh, just
but
in
like,
general?
If you could pick one of these guys and you have to put the future All-Star flag.
I mean, Oladipo or Gordon for sure. I mean, two of them. I think they have a few more too, to be honest.
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
I just think it's too early right now.
For sure.
But they'll be good in a few years.
There's some Thunder potential here, for sure. All right, we're moving on to the Charlotte Hornets, who has assembled a very bizarre team. They traded for Nick Batum, who I really like. He's on an expiring deal. They traded for Jeremy Lamb, Spencer Hawes. They signed Jeremy Lin and Tyler Hansbrough. They drafted Frank Kaminsky. So they now have Kaminsky, Spencer Hawes, and Cody Zeller. So they're really cornering the market on tall, unathletic white guys.
It's about 3 too many.
Yeah, it's probably 3 too many. Michael Carter-Williams is also done for the year with a shoulder injury. That's really going to hurt him. He was really starting to come on as a real game changer last year. I don't really know what this team is. You got Al Jefferson there, who was great 2 years ago. You'd think it's a team built around him and Kemba, but then how does Batum and Jeremy Lamb fit in? Are they just relegated to being outside shooters? Who's going to play the 4 full-time, if there really even is a full-time? Are they just going to play committee with all these white dudes? It's a strange team. I could see if everything falls right, possibly challenging for the 8th seed. I just don't... I'm not convinced. I think this is probably another lottery season, and then they kind of retool and try to get more of an identity, because that's the problem for me.
Same. They just have a lot of pieces, but I'm not sure they fit in with each other on this team. Yeah.
It's a team that GMs are really going to look at towards trade season.
Exactly. It's definitely a team that other teams will look to be picking pieces from, but altogether, definitely not playoffs for me.
Because somebody's going to get left out of this rotation, whether it's Kaminsky or Zeller or Marvin Williams. Like, some of these guys who are on affordable deals are going to be left out, and some GM is going to snatch them up and probably put them in a better position to succeed. The Atlanta Hawks are next. They set a franchised record for wins last year. They traded for Tiago Splitter and Tim Hardaway Jr., 2 guys that are likely going to be in that rotation for big minutes. They re-signed Paul Millsap, which was a big surprise to a lot of people. And they kind of lost Mike Scott, who played some decent backup 4 and 5 for them, due to a potential 25-year prison charge for drugs. I wrote that down here. So those emoji tattoos are going to be a real hit in the Slimer. But I like this team. You're basically bringing the same core back. You're losing DeMar Carroll, adding Splitter and Hardaway Jr. So you're going to have to see more Thabo Cephalosha, who's coming off a ankle/leg break due to the law. That's what it said under injury, the law.
He fought the law?
And the law won. Korver's probably going to have to play some 3. Hardaway's going to have to play some 3. Bazemore's going to have to play some 3. So it's a deep team. You still got Dennis Schroeder, now in his 3rd year, I believe. So maybe see a little more development, a little more calming from him, because he's a little reckless at times. And, they're well coached. They have a good home court. a little more sore now than a couple years ago during the Joe Johnson era. They seem to really have gotten behind this kind of Spurs, a Jace kind of playing style. They're really like Spurs East. I mean, let's call it what it is. And I think they're going to be successful. I really enjoy watching Horford and Millsap and Teague do what they do. Love watching Korver come off screens. He's literally unstoppable when it comes to that. And I think they're probably going to be fighting for the top 3 seed again.
Same. I put them right behind Cleveland in the East. They're definitely the 2 or the 3.
All right, maybe they don't have 4 All-Stars this year, but
no,
they'll be strong. All right, we're moving on to my team now, the Miami Heat. A lot of changes for them. They drafted Justice Winslow, who somehow slipped to 10 in the draft. I still don't entirely understand how. They signed Amari Stoudemire and Gerald Green, and re-signed Dwayne Wade and Goran Dragic. So the team that never was, which was the combination of Dragic, Wade, Deng, Bosch, and Hassan Whiteside, is finally going to come together, and I'm really excited to see the prospects. You add Green as kind of the come off the bench, instant offense, 3-point shooter type. Winslow's going to pick up the slack when it comes to Wade or Deng being out, playing some defense, scoring a little bit. There's not a spot that I think he could have landed that would be better for him. He doesn't have to come in right away and be relied upon, but he's going to get minutes. He's going to be in there with guys like veterans that can teach him how to play the game. He had some Luol Deng comparisons already, so he gets to watch him up close. And of course, it's fantastically coached by Eric Spoelstra. And really, it's just about health. Like, how many games are Wade and Bosch going to miss? And do we now have enough depth to maintain our position? I think our offense is going to be really good with a lot of ball screens with Whiteside and Dragic and Bosch. I think that pick and roll is going to be unstoppable, that pick and pop. And a lot of handoffs. I think Wade and Deng are going to be cutting a lot, or Winslow or Green or whoever's in there at the wing. I think we could be anywhere from like 2 to 7 in the East, just depending on how things work out. So I'm going to kind of cut the difference and say we're at somewhere between like 5 and 4. So I'm excited for the season. I'm cautiously optimistic. As an unbiased point of view, how do you see this team gelling?
Definitely playoffs for me. I like the pieces. I mean, you guys were good last year, and Chris Bosh missed it, that unfortunate
a good part of
medical situation. He's going to be back, and with the drafting of Winslow and signing of the other pieces, Whiteside's going to continue to grow. I really like that kid a lot. Definitely playoffs, especially in the East. You guys, why not? Maybe second round, and then we'll see from there.
Yeah. LeBron, we're coming. We're coming for you. The Washington Wizards are up next. Another team I really like. They drafted Kelly Oubre, who was a guy that some people projected to be a top 10 pick at one point. He slipped all the way to them. They signed Gary Neal, Allen Anderson, Jarrett Dudley, a lot of veterans, good wing fill-ins. Otto Porter really decided to develop late last year all of a sudden, and I think that's a real game changer. That's why Paul Pierce was expendable for them. You got Ramon Sessions as the backup in a late trade last year to John Wall. They re-signed Drew Gooden, who was solid for them, and I really like the team. I mean, they're poorly coached again. They refuse to get rid of I can't think of his name. Randy Whitman. Solid. Because they keep succeeding in spite of him, and they don't reach the heights that they could because they're still successful. It's not like a team like the Grizzlies who made it to the Western Conference Finals and still fired their coach. They're not an organization like that. where they think that they could still get even further, and that's what's holding them back. They think that Whitman is a part of the process when they're actually succeeding in spite of him. Another year of development for Bradley Beal, who I eventually think is going to be like a consistent all-star if he can just stay healthy, and they can put him in positions to succeed, because of their lack of backup point guards, they keep using him as a ball handler, which I think he can be good at in small bursts, but I think they need to just kind of let him loose, like i.e. Ray Allen, the Celtics. You know, he was obviously a consistent all-star when he did need to handle the ball in Seattle or Milwaukee, but I think he really took off when he could play a little bit off of it. And John Wall's health is obviously key to that. They can move Nene to the backup center with Gortat and play Chris Humphries at the 4 if necessary. Nene and Gortat I don't think play particularly well together. It's good enough, but I think Nene is better off playing like 20 minutes a game, just giving them enough energy to kind of rest Gortat. Because he's still a very productive player. He's just a little old and worn down. So you got to keep his minutes down. You got to keep his, put him in positions where he can really use his skill set, which is one of a kind. Otto Porter development is big. He's going to have to kind of up his 3-point shooting, up his cutting off the ball, and just play off of Beal and Wall. And that threesome is going to be what makes or breaks this team. The veteran improvements are good in case he doesn't improve as much, and you can put in Jared Dudley or Gary Neal or Allen Anderson, but they're pretty much just there to, keep the lead. Bring in your bench guys, don't choke it away and have to ride on these starters as long. So they have big upside to me. I think they could be anywhere from, if all things go well, they could be anywhere from 2 to 6 in the East. Thoughts as I try to regain my voice?
Playoffs for sure. Obviously, the backcourt is really exciting. Like you touched on, if Porter keeps developing, I like the Nene. I like the pairing, but like you said, just not on the court together. Really like Gortat. Honestly, if they all stay healthy, they may be making a run to the Eastern Conference Finals. I just don't see them beating Cleveland right now, but they could definitely make a playoff run if they all stay healthy and all goes well.
There you go. We move on to Western Conference finally, as we're about an hour in.
So much for keeping it short.
Yeah, right. We got about
Stop talking about these jobber or Jays teams.
Yeah, and the problem is the West is better than the East, so we probably should have sped through those faster. All right, Dallas Mavericks. They signed Wesley Matthews, Darren Williams, JaVale McGee, Samuel Dallenberg. They re-signed J.J. Barea. They traded for Zaza Pachulia. They drafted Justin Anderson. It's pretty much an entirely new team built around Dirk and Chandler Parsons. You got Wesley Matthews in there, who was great with Portland. He's, I believe, their highest paid player, which is kind of baffling. He's going to run off screens, and the problem is he's replacing Monte Ellis in a way. But Monte is a whole different kind of player. Monte was really like the perfect guy to kind of play with Dirk and their team that was built last year. And I really liked the team they built last year up until they brought Rondo into the fold and totally threw off their spacing and their chemistry. They were like on pace to be one of the most efficient offenses in league history with Devin Harris and Jameer Nelson at the point guard last year. And you'd think, okay, that's an upgrade to Rondo, but really you're just bringing in an entirely new player, an entirely new kind of player. Devin Harris and Jameer Nelson were just there basically to handle the ball a little bit and hit open threes off Monte, Dirk, Parsons, and then Chandler rolling to the rim. It was really like a perfect group in terms of how you want an NBA offense to be built nowadays. And then they totally screwed it up, and now they have to recover because Monte fell out of favor because he didn't like playing with Rondo. Tyson didn't like it all, so he left to Phoenix. and now they have to build an entirely new team, and I'm not really a fan of it. I think they're going to miss the playoffs. I think Darren Williams is a big name, but he has not been productive for a while. I don't, Matthews is coming off a major injury, and then they have to play a center threesome of Pachulia, JaVale McGee, and Sam Dallenberg with Dirk, who's continuing to get older and get less and less effective. I mean, I'll pass. I'll pass on this team.
Same, no playoffs for me. I think the window's closed. I think their best chance was last year, and they messed it up with some of the moves they made, like you said. So they'll be rebuilding soon.
Yeah, unfortunately. And I feel bad for Dirk because he had that one great finals run. He won the championship. They immediately tore that team down. And then finally they kind of recover from that, get some chemistry working, and then they just ruin it.
He's too loyal, but I'd love to see him go somewhere else for like a year or two.
He's not
finish his career on a team that he has a chance to do something with, because he's had a great career. He's been a stand-up guy his whole career.
Probably a top 40 player of all time. Move on to the Memphis Grizzlies, who re-signed one of my favorite players in the league, Marc Gasol. They signed Brandon Wright to kind of be his backup, a little bit of change of pace guy. And they traded for Derek Fisher hitman Matt Barnes. So I like this team. The defense first. They're nothing flashy. They're grimy. They have a little bit more of a bench punch now with after trading for Jeff Green last year. That's going to be a weird kind of chemistry thing for me because he was starting for a long time in a lot of different teams, and now all of a sudden he's probably going to be moved to the bench in favor of Matt Barnes or Tony Allen, depending on how they want to go with that. And I don't think it's going to work out. I think as a bench scorer, you have to have a kind of different mentality. And I don't know if he has that. I think he still thinks he wants to be a star, and he could find himself on the trade market or the waiver wire soon enough if it doesn't work out. Because they have enough wing depth now with Barnes and Allen and Courtney Lee and all those guys. So I think top 3 seed again for me, just well-coached defense, Zebo and Gasol doing stuff that nobody else seems to do, and after all these years, teams still can't really figure it out. Teams aren't built to deal with it anymore, I think, is the biggest issue.
They're a throwback. That's what it is.
For sure.
They're not built like these new teams. I'd agree with you. I think they're going to be... they'll definitely have home court. I'm not sure, what the seating's going to be, if they fall to the 4 or not, but home court and in that building, that's big for them, especially with the way they play and they just grind teams out. So, say playoffs, home court advantage, look for them to make a run. If all goes well, maybe Western Conference Finals again.
Yeah, the West is so bizarre and so dependent on injury. Like, nobody had the Thunder missing the playoffs last year, going in. And just a couple things didn't break their way, and all of a sudden they're out.
Oklahoma City Westbrooks, you mean?
The Oklahoma City Westbrooks, yeah. I guess, no, never mind. They're not in this division. This division is so stacked, I can't even keep up. But we're going to go with the New Orleans Pelicans next. Re-signing a lot of their guys last year. Omar Sheik, Alexis Ajinka, I think that's how you say it. Norris Cole, Dante Cunningham. They signed Alonzo G and Kendrick Perkins. They have a new coach in Alvin Gentry, who was with the Suns for a long time. He's an assistant and a head coach. And I think he's a really good fit for this team, just offensively. Running pick and rolls with Anthony Davis, having Ryan Anderson on the outside, having Eric Gordon on the outside. Just focusing the team around your 2 best players, which is Drew Holiday and Anthony Davis, obviously. And Tyreek Evans getting in that mix also as a ball handler and a pick and roll guy. They, I believe, just signed Nate Robinson also, who is going to play in the absence while Holiday is still kind of recovering from his injury. It's a little concerning because he's been recovering for a long time now. Quincy Pondexter was a really good addition for them as kind of to solidify that small forward spot, and I just like the guys at every position, and you have arguably the best player in the league. Pretty much that simple for me.
Which is crazy because do you think they're going to sneak in again this year?
Oh, they're for sure making the playoffs.
With the Thunder coming back, that's one less.
Yeah, but the Blazers fell out.
True.
Blazers fell out, I think.
You think they're going to be in the... I don't think they're going to get home court, but the lower half, what do you think? Around maybe like the 5 or 6?
Yeah, I mean,
That big of a
I think
jump?
the difference between Monty Williams and Alvin Gentry is big enough to where you can make a pretty substantial jump. And, I mean, the Warriors aren't going to win as many games as they did last year.
True.
I think the Spurs are going to be amazing, but we'll talk about them later. Yeah, I mean, the West is really tough. I mean, it came down to one game in the final game last year.
If one of their guys goes out, they may miss the playoffs altogether.
Yeah.
The West is crazy.
And the Spurs jumped from 2 seed to 6 seed or something. I think they're going to be higher because of a team that I think is going to fall, but we'll talk about that later. A team that I think will be at the top is the Houston Rockets. That was my mouse. They re-signed Corey Brewer. They re-signed KJ McDaniels, who they got from the Sixers, who really didn't even play for them. But he's a really young, promising player who could develop and play some more minutes if they want to, rest some of their guys. Not that Harden really needs rest at this point. They re-signed Patrick Beverley. They re-signed Jason Terry. But the big move was they traded for Ty Lawson. Curious to see how the Lawson-Beverley dynamic goes. Because you need Beverley for defense. Ty Lawson is, if he's focused, he can be a solid defender. He hasn't been focused for a while. Now that he's on a championship contender, will he be a little more focused? But this team is really deep. You got dudes that are, professionals, if not more so, at every position. Between Ariza, who's a strong 3, Corey Brewer's behind him. They drafted Sam Decker, who's going to be behind them. I mentioned KJ McDaniels. Terrence Jones and Donatas Montayunas had really good years last year. They're there at the 4. It's going to be a really good team, and I think they could be the best team in the West, if not the second. They were the 2 seed last year. It's not going to shock me if they get there, if not higher next year, because you have one of the 5 best players in the NBA and one of the 15 best in Dwight Howard, who was injured half the year last year. So if he comes back being healthy, if some of the young guys improve and get more minutes, if you add Lawson, who has a whole new dynamic, I think it's a bomb squad, realistically. Now that I'm kind of laying it all out there.
I say top 3 for sure. I mean, they're also a team that they play hard every night. James Harden never takes a night off, and when your best player plays like that to win every night and just drops a ridiculous amount of points, they're a regular season team that they'll definitely strive for the 1 seed. They're not going to take their foot off the gas to rest people or anything like that.
And even if they did, they have enough guys to where they could.
So, top 3 for sure.
All right. The team who made the biggest splash in the offseason to me was the San Antonio Spurs, which is not usually said for them, as they usually just re-sign their own guys, maybe have a draft pick here or there. They signed the biggest free agent out there in LaMarcus Aldridge, one of the top few in David West. Added Jimmer Fredette, who was a top 10 draft pick a few years ago, who on any other team you would laugh at, as Rob just did. He's probably going to average 10 for the Spurs.
You will give them something. If there's any team that can get something out of him. Not that he's a bad player or anything, but just, up until this point, there's no proof of anything else.
Yeah, I mean, he can still shoot, which is a legitimate NBA skill.
Yeah.
They re-signed Kawhi Leonard, which is huge. They re-signed Danny Green, which is also huge. Manu Ginobili is coming back for another go. And they also traded for the Kings' Ray McCallum, who had some moments in backup point guard relief. I mean, it's... What can you really say? It's the best coach in the league. It's all-stars everywhere, at every position. It's... that's not even mentioning their rookie last year, Kyle Anderson, who didn't even play for them, who was just a stud in summer league and is probably going to make a pretty big impact this season. And we didn't mention guys like Patty Mills, who was hurt for a lot of last year, who's always given them something. Boris Diaw, who's been a solid professional ever since joining the Spurs. I'm trying to wonder who gets left out. Like, Duncan is going to play big minutes, obviously, or maybe he doesn't. Maybe he only plays 25. Aldridge is going to respect big minutes. Diaw's got to be in there. Anderson's got to be in there, I think, probably at the 4. And then David West. Like, who gets the minutes? But it doesn't matter if they're all productive. You can just rest one dude one day and some dude another. If one dude's got it going, one dude doesn't. They're all unselfish, in theory. Aldridge really is the only kind of question mark because he hasn't been in the system before. And neither is David West, but giving up $11 million or whatever he did shows that he's pretty unselfish. He just wants to win at this point. And as we got some trap music in the background.
I would say the 1 seed, but there's going to be nights where they just are given rest. So those few games that they might lose to teams that they shouldn't because the big 3 aren't playing. Actually, I don't even know if you could say big 3 at this point.
Yeah,
there's a starting lineup is big.
It's a big 6.
Yeah. Between the rest and, they a little bit older, so Parker, Ginobili, if they go down, miss some games. But they're going to have home court, and when the playoffs come, that's all that matters. They're built for the playoffs. They're built to make a championship run, and I expect nothing less than the Western Conference Finals.
Nope. I think probably my favorite to win the title, if I had to pick one right now. It's between them and Cleveland and probably the Warriors, who I don't want to disrespect. All right, let's talk about the LA Clippers, who I think are, as we move to the Pacific Division, they made a lot of changes. They signed Paul Pierce. They signed Wesley Johnson. They signed Josh Smith. They signed Pablo Prigioni. They signed Chuck Hayes. They re-signed DeAndre Jordan in one of the most dramatic moves of the offseason. They re-signed Austin Rivers. They traded for Lance Stevenson, who's shooting like 20% this preseason, just to be known. This is a dope
Weird
NBA 2K team. This team in NBA 2K kills it. In real life, not so sure. If you don't think that a team with Jamal Crawford, Wesley Johnson, DeAndre Jordan, Chris Paul, Paul Pierce, and Josh Smith, and Lance Stevenson, and Austin Rivers is going to be a chemistry disaster, you ain't know shit about chemistry. I don't know how this team is going to look. I don't know how this rotation is going to look. I don't know if these dudes are going to be on the roster come January. I'm going to take a wild guess and say that Lance Stevenson is not.
No. That's
because why do you need him and Jamal Crawford? Like, don't you kind of need him for the same role? Kind of like 6-man offense. I mean,
you would think Lance is there for the defense to match up with some of these guys, but
all right, so why do you need Wesley Johnson then?
I'm not saying you need all of them, to be honest.
Yeah, you don't. And, like, where does the minutes for Pierce come in? Does he only play, like, 15 minutes a game up until the playoffs? That would probably make sense. Josh Smith is going to be, like, your backup big. So, like, he's the only dude that I'm looking at this depth chart, and I know for sure when Blake or DeAndre sits, it's going to be Josh Smith. The front court, I know, obviously, Chris Paul is getting there. Redick is getting minutes, but then everyone else is just, who knows? Is it going to be situational? Can Doc coach a team like this? Like, if this was the Spurs, I'd have no problem. All right, I know Pop is going to put all these pieces in the right position. I don't know if Doc is going to. This kind of seems like one of those Celtics teams that kind of imploded. Maybe this is it. I mean, I have them making the playoffs just because there's too much talent, but they're not a top 5 team to me. Like a lot of people think, they're not a championship contender to me. I think they're 7, 6 seed. Like, if there was a team that was going to slip out from last year that wasn't the Trailblazers, it would be this team, to me.
And what's funny, I thought they got over the hump last year. That huge Game 7 victory, but like this year I actually think they regressed.
And then they choked right after in
Exactly.
the series against the Rockets.
If there is a team that's going to drop, I mean, I think we may be looking at, because of the chemistry problems, a bad start or a rough patch, you know? Like, honestly, they may be fighting for the 8th seed.
Yeah.
7, 8, championship, definitely not. Definitely not.
Alright, so we've established that. We're on the same page. One of these times we'll disagree.
Well, I mean, once we start talking about a certain team.
Alright, well, let's just go to that now.
Alright, well, let's go to the 2015-2016 NBA Championship, Los Angeles Lakers.
Alright, well, they traded for Roy Hibbert. I mentioned that earlier. They signed Lou Williams, Brandon Bass, Meta World Peace. They drafted D'Angelo Russell. It's the Kobe farewell tour, whether he says it or not. That's what I'm taking it as. You add a couple legitimate NBA players in Bass and Hibbert and Lou Williams. Problem for me is, aside from the fact that Byron Scott's their coach, there's not enough shots to go around between Nick Young, Lou Williams, D'Angelo Russell, Jordan Clarkson, and the Mamba himself. There are not enough shots. So either one or two of these guys is getting traded, or Kobe's just going to keep him on the bench because he's really the coach. If Kobe gets hurt, if that's what kind of they're doing here and they're kind of making plans just in case, that's one thing. But you got to play Clarkson and Russell because they're your young guys. You got to get them minutes somehow. Clarkson really showed a lot last year. He was a guy I was really impressed with. Lou Williams, that signing really baffled me because he seemed like a dude that would sign to a veteran team that would kind of try to push them over the edge. Like the Heat or the Warriors or the Thunder or someone like that. On here, he's just kind of in the way, it seems like. The big story, aside from all of that, is Julius Randle coming back. How does he really play? Because we only saw him for 10 minutes last year. How does he even look, especially coming off the injury? But they have kind of Brandon Bass as a good guy to kind of teach him the ropes. They're similar builds, so maybe he can kind of learn how Brandon Bass has had such a long career and a productive career. I don't know. I can't see them making the playoffs.
Of course not.
But I mean, talk me into it if you were going to.
If Kobe stays healthy and he has a flashback to like number 8, then maybe. But you know what? They're definitely better than last year. I'll say that. Like,
Yeah.
I like the additions. I mean, we have a legitimate center. I'm hoping Kobe can light that fire under Hibbert and he could play like he showed flashes in Indiana. I'm looking forward to seeing Randall. Obviously, like you said, we only saw him for like a
Marcelo
quarter.
Huertas is on this team. International.
Yeah, there's a
veteran?
lot of there's a lot of people on this team that
Larry
surprise
Nance Jr.
you. Yeah.
Wow. This is a weird team.
It is. Nance, Russell, I like the draft picks. I mean, I definitely like the D'Angelo Russell one.
Bench celebrator extraordinaire, Robert Sacre.
Of course, I mean, you need him.
You
you need him
him.
for just team morale. I mean, we're better than last year, so I'm expecting to win more games, and I'll watch this team until Kobe gets hurt, and then tune out. So,
There you go.
you know,
You can still watch Russell and Randall at least.
I'm not interested in seeing Nick Young throw up 15 3-pointers a game.
Fair. All right.
I am interested in his post-shot celebrations.
Yeah, and his rap lyrics. All right, let's talk about the Phoenix Suns. They signed Tyson Chandler. That was their big offseason signing, along with re-signing Brandon Knight. They added Mirza Teletovic. They added Sonny Weems, who's making an NBA comeback. Shout-outs.
I feel like I haven't heard that name in a long time.
Right? Since the waiver wire of like NBA 2K9. John Lure is on this team. They drafted Devin Booker from Kentucky, who I really liked and was looking at the Heat getting before Justice fell to us. This is a weird team. Markieff Morris had a lot of off-season drama after they traded his brother. Does that take away the power of the Morris twins now that you've split them up? That's a distinct
No more twin magic.
No more twin magic. TJ Warren, who they drafted last year, was sort of coming on towards the end. Where does he fit in the rotation with PJ Tucker and Archie Goodwin? I'm not quite sure. You have the 2 point guards in there who... The Suns keep rolling with this thing, and I'm not entirely buying it. Like, Bledsoe should be the guy. He's the best player on the team. He's the most dynamic. He does get injured from time to time. But I would just let it be his team. I don't entirely get the re-signing of Brandon Knight. Brandon Knight's a better three-point shooter, and he's a little bit bigger. He can play, the two a little bit. But as your starting combination is like your franchise building blocks, I'm not digging it so much. I wouldn't have done that deal if I was them.
I thought as soon as they got rid of Dragic, it was Bledsoe's team from, Like, I thought that was the plan, but I don't know. It's a weird team, like you said, but...
they're built to win.
They are. In the West, let's put it like this. They're not going anywhere deep.
No,
you know what I mean? So
I don't even think they're making the playoffs. If they're in the East...
They'll be fighting for the 8th seed. I think they'll be... a good team. Their formula team, they're going to give you a fight every night, but especially in the West, man, that schedule is just too tough.
Yeah. I do like the kind of fit of the pieces. Chandler rolling to the rim, Markieff Morris kind of playing inside out.
I'll watch them if they're on ESPN or TNT.
Yeah.
They're definitely going to be nice to watch, but
we cannot say the same about the next team. Sacramento Kings. What a disaster of an offseason. Imagine these pieces together, if you will. Rajon Rondo. These are all their new additions, I should say. Rajon Rondo, Marco Bellinelli, Kosta Koufis, Omri Caspi, Caron Butler, Quincy Acey, Seth Curry, and they drafted Willie Cauley-Stein. Need to remind you, this is already a team with the chemistry magnet himself, DeMarcus Cousins, and shot taker extraordinaire Rudy Gay. This team is so hilariously awful. It's coached by George Karl, who apparently has already gotten into a fight with Rondo and DeMarcus.
They should have cameras on them 24/7, this team.
Yeah.
If the NBA really wants to make money on NBA TV.
First of all, he probably couldn't, because he probably couldn't air half of it. He probably couldn't air half of the stuff that goes on. Like, can you imagine what Caron Butler is saying to himself in this locker room right now? Marco Bellinelli just taking 30 shots a game.
This is another one of those teams, though, where other teams, you want to take pieces from them,
Yeah, but most of them are
a few.
Yeah, someone please save Ben McLemore, for God's sakes. For God's sakes. Someone save that poor kid. I don't even know. He's better than Bellinelli. He's better than Seth Curry. But on a team like this, he won't get sufficient run.
You would think Steph has some pull, man.
Yeah, you'd think.
Look out for your brother. Get him out of there.
He had a really good summer league, and that's why he got signed. I don't know. I think they could make a run for the worst record in the league with the Sixers, and they're going to be actually trying, which is the sad
game
part.
Of the year.
So yeah, Sixers game. Set your DVRs now. All right, so let's just run away from that train wreck as fast as possible. The Golden State Warriors. Is there really much to say? They're going to be awesome. They brought everybody back. Steve Kerr's going to miss a few games due to a back injury. The only real addition they had is they traded for Jason Thompson from the Sixers, who is basically just going to take the very few David Lee minutes. Other than that, it's the same team that just won like 100 games. Number 1 or 2 seed in the West. I mean, top 5 player. Klay Thompson made a huge jump. I think the next guy to make a huge jump has got to be Harrison Barnes. But with Iguodala there, I mean, he only has so much space to do so. Draymond made a huge step last year. He got paid because of it. Still got Bogut and Ezeli. I mean, it's a squad.
Is Bogut, do we know how much time, though? Broken nose and all that? Or is he going to be ready?
I think he might be the masked...
The masked
Aussie.
Okay. Alright.
But, I mean, Ezeli is really good. And then they could just play small with Draymond. You could put Jason Thompson in there. You could put Spates in there. I mean, there's a reason why this team won the title.
There's a lot of options.
They're so versatile. That's what they could do. You could play Barnes from the 2 to the 4. You could play Draymond from the 5 to the 3. You could play Iguodala from the 1 to the 4. Like, you could play Livingston from the 1 to the 3. It's crazy. And that's not even, I mean, I pretty much mentioned everybody. Never mind. That James Michael McAdoo kid had a pretty good offseason. Like, he looked like a real player in Summer League and the preseason. And they probably won't even need him. It's a great organization, great fan base, and a great team again. Another team I'm planting my flag in. We're moving on to the Northwest, our final division. We already passed about the 1 minute 16 mark, and we have some time to cut, so we're making good time. The Utah Jazz, flag planted, making the playoffs, 8th seed.
Book it.
This is my pick. They were really coming on towards the second half of last year. If you just projected out the second half of last year and kind of let them continue to play at that level, they definitely would have been a playoff team throughout. They drafted Trey Lyles, who I really like, from Kentucky. They have just a really solid starting 5 with Gordon Hayward, Derek Favors, Rudy Gobert, who made a huge jump last year, is just a elite rim protector, defensive anchor, rebounder type. Dante Exum, their number 1 pick from last year, did tear his ACL in the offseason, but they still have what's the kid's name from Michigan? Trey something. As we can't bring
Burke?
Yeah, Trey Burke. And they also have Alec Burks, who missed all of last year, who's now is back. Rodney Hood, who they selected in the first round last year, is really developed nicely into a shooter, scorer off the bench. He could potentially even start as if they want to move Alec Burks to the point, who I think is probably more of a pure point guard than Trey Burke is. But I just really like the team. I think it's really well coached by Quinn Snyder. I think they have a really good home court advantage. It's really tough to play there, the altitude and such. And I expect them to win, like 45 games or so, maybe more, even in the tough West. Any thoughts? You riding with me? Can you pick up what I'm throwing down?
I don't know about the playoffs, though, in the West. That's the only thing. I think they're going to be a good team above 500. What'd you say, about 45 games?
Yeah, like 45 wins.
I don't see why not. I just don't know if it's enough in the West, That's the only problem.
Yeah, they're going to be fighting the Suns. They're going to be fighting...
They're a playoff contender, for sure.
All right. I got them. I got the flag in the playoffs. All right, moving on from the playoffs to the not-so-playoffs. The Minnesota Timberwolves and the number 1 overall pick, Karl Anthony Towns, obviously the biggest addition. Tyus Jones from Duke also drafted. Just one other note is that Sam Mitchell, from formerly of the Raptors, is going to be their interim head coach, while Flip Saunders is dealing with some lymphoma. So hopefully he'll get better. But Sam Mitchell, a good coach in his time, he'll, keep the ship righted, even though the team is not going to be that good anyway. There's just a lot of young talent here. obviously, you have Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins. I mean, I think that twosome is going to be just unbeatable going forward. I mean, once they kind of build a better team around them, maybe they get one other young piece, kind of get rid of these big albatross contracts with Pekovic and Rubio and Kevin Martin and all these dudes kind of hangers on from the past era. They could be a really good team. But for now, they're back in the lottery. It's just too many weird fits, and Pekovic and Gorky Dang fighting for minutes with Karl Anthony Towns is going to be bad, and it's still a disaster in Minnesota. Don't get it twisted. Even though KG is back, he is not bringing back the 2002 team with him. So, was that the year that they were really good?
Marbury and Sprewell next?
Yeah, Marbury and Sprewell. Those are two guys I would love to see on the Sixers. All right. I mean,
yeah, lottery. Nothing really left to say.
Nope. All right, we're trudging on here. Back to the lottery we go. Denver Nuggets are back. They have a new coach in Mike Malone. They re-signed Danilo Gallinari, Wilson Chandler, Darrell Arthur, Jameer Nelson, Will Barton, and they drafted Emmanuel Mudiay. I mean, they're like the Bobcats West. Hornets West. I knew that was going to happen at some point. Just tap out. It's not going to happen.
I'm done.
We only got like 3 more teams. They're just a lot of trade pieces. Decent everywhere, not great anywhere. And hopefully Mudiay can develop into something. I mean, at least he's in an environment to where it's not like toxic.
Yeah.
He's got guys he can pass to, guys that can make plays. Real NBA players.
They're a good organization, They
Yeah.
definitely...
Got Kenneth Reed there running up and catching alley-oops. Yusef Nurkic played really well in his rookie year last year. Gary Harris is still there. So there's pieces. They're just not there yet.
They'll win some games, just nowhere close to enough in the
Yeah,
West.
they'll be very watchable. If they play any of these other good teams, it'll be fun to watch. They'll be competitive. They'll win. There won't be an embarrassment. They're just not good enough. And they should probably start moving some of these other pieces because you don't want to be... There's no reason to be at the bottom of the lottery, so to speak. I mean, in terms of draft order. There's no reason to be the 8th pick in the lottery.
Yeah.
You either go...
It's all or nothing.
All or nothing. Sixers or nothing. All right, so a team that made probably the biggest jump in terms of potential Western Conference final contender to now probably a lottery team is the Portland Trail Blazers, and it pretty much just all comes down to losing LaMarcus Aldridge. They signed a lot of good players, or traded for good players. Ed Davis formerly of the Lakers and Grizzlies, Al Farouk Aminu, who was really good with the Pelicans. Chris Kaman is back from a hunting trip, I guess. Gerald Henderson they traded for with Noah Vonleh, who was a first-round pick last year. Maybe they can get something out of him and kind of take out that potential. Mason Plumlee from the Nets is over here now, as well as Mo Harkless with the Magic. So they kind of bought low on a lot of young guys and are putting them with Lillard, trying to hope for some magic. And I think they'll be formidable just because they do still have Lillard and guys that kind of complement him around them. But there's just not enough talent in the West. And I like Lillard. I like C.J. McCollum, who's another one of their young guys. Vonleh can probably develop. Harkless was put into a really bad position in Orlando. Now he's in a better one. And you can maybe make something happen, at least for the future. But for now, you got to have 2 superstars in this league. And I do think C.J. McCollum has potential, but it's a kind of similar thing with Bledsoe and Brandon Knight. They're 2 very similar players playing off each other, and I don't know if it's going to necessarily work. So, watchable, entertaining, but lottery bound.
100% agree. I just want to see Damian Lillard take a lot of shots and make a lot of great plays.
He's going to have a ridiculous statistical season.
Yep.
All right. The main event, I suppose, of this division is the Oklahoma City Thunder. And the last team we're going to talk about, they re-signed Enes Kanter and Kyle Singler, who were both mid-season additions last year. They drafted Cameron Payne, who a lot of people liked. He'll kind of fill that Reggie Jackson void that they lost as the backup point guard, kind of playmaker off the bench. And then they finally got rid of their coach. Billy Donovan from Florida is now the new coach. I'm not entirely sold that he's, the perfect fit. But this is their attempt to sell Durant that this is the team going forward, because this is the last year of his contract. Big storyline. Because if they don't contend and if they don't please Durant, he's gone. Because he's going to get the biggest deal ever. Like, literally the biggest deal ever. From either the Lakers or the Wizards or whoever. Someone is going to move heaven and earth to get him. If not all teams. They're all going to try to get him. The Heat are going to try. Even teams that, fiscally can't. Literally have no money. Are going to give him all the money. They're going to just, all right, here. So it's got to work out with him and Russ. In terms of chemistry, it's got to work out with these other pieces. How does, Enes Kanter's terrible defense play in? Can he play off Serge Ibaka? Can Cameron Payne, be a decent bench player because they don't have that many? Can Kyle Singler be the starting small forward or shooting guard they need as just a dude that could play off the two superstars? Everything has to go perfectly for Durant to stay, in my opinion. And I don't think it necessarily will. I think they'll be a 5 seed. They'll be in there. Durant looks fine in terms of recovering from injury. I think this just seems like the downfall of the Oklahoma City Thunder. Even though they're not going to be bad, they're not going to be good enough. And that might be all it takes. Durant might see out of the corner of his eye Beal and John Wall and these guys balling out, and he's just yeah, that looks way better to me. The East, yeah, I want to play in the East. Will you get rid of Randy Whitman? All right, cool. Let's do this.
I do think he's gone after this year, but this is going to be very interesting to watch. Do you think there's any way OKC just says, listen, we know you're gone, and they move him? I mean, it'd be so hard with the contract and all that. But...
with the Harden deal, never say never. But I feel like they're going to fight. They're going to fight tooth and nail
all in,
for
try
it.
to get that championship before he leaves?
Yeah, they're all right.
Yeah.
I mean, the team is in position to do so. If anything else, they have a good starting 5.
Only question is, do you think now that he's back, well, A, if he could stay healthy with the foot, B, after the ridiculous second half that Westbrook had, statistically at least, do you think there's any, are they finally going to have the blow-up that we've been wanting for years?
Yeah.
That they've been pretending
by we wanting, you mean Skip Bayless has been wanting. I think it's possible. I think they're 2 alpha males fighting for that number 1 spot. And Durant, to me, is obviously a better player. But I don't know. I don't think this is Westbrook's team going forward if he were to leave. I think Westbrook would also look to leave. I think he wants to go to a bigger market.
That's interesting.
The thing is that markets don't really matter in the NBA anymore. Durant is already one of the 2 biggest stars in the league, and he plays for Oklahoma City. I just think the organization, after trading Harden, I think they lost a lot of faith in the organization. I think the Enes Kanter move was really? That's the guy that you think is the missing piece? And, I don't know. I just think there's some underhanded resentment. And I don't know if Billy Donovan is the cure-all.
From both of them? Or just on KD's part, you think?
I think a little bit of both. I mean, they're both, best friends with the dude, it seems like. The way they dumped Perry Jones apparently didn't sit so well. In theory, Reggie Jackson, that whole blow-up didn't help.
They really do get rid of good players.
Yeah.
Think about it.
I mean, they didn't like Reggie Jackson, but just, how it all went down, I don't think they really liked. And, I don't know. for a team that, like, for an organization that gets as much credit as they do for drafting those 3 guys, 4, I guess, if you include Ibaka, they really haven't done anything since. I mean, they got to the finals, but, like, who have they drafted that you're like, all right, like Steven Adams? Like,
No
he was
one.
a top 10 pick.
No one.
Like, I just feel like the confidence is waning. And unless, like, maybe Cameron Payne is awesome, and they're like, all right, we have another building block here. You know, Perry Jones was a bust. They traded him out the door. Who's that other kid they drafted who, like, can't shoot worth shit? Who's on their bench? I forget his name, but, like, he's another first rounder that has done nothing. I think they traded, like, another one of their first rounders in the D League.
Lamb's gone.
Yes,
I mean, they had him for a little while.
Lamb was a lottery pick that they traded he was like the cornerstone of the Harden trade. Steven Adams is now relegated to, like, backup center with Cantor there. It's just, I don't know. Like,
Slash enforcer.
There's nothing, / mustache enthusiast. There's nothing, to me, like, there's nothing that would garner confidence. Aside from, you know, the Billy Donovan hire was a pretty big one, but he's not.
He's unproven.
He's not Calipari.
Yeah.
If it was Calipari, like,
I mean,
okay.
they did their thing in college, don't get me wrong, but...
Yeah, I mean, they weren't winning titles. He doesn't have that same... He's like the next tier below Calipari and Coach K. If they got one of those guys, it'd be like, okay, we know that you guys are serious.
Yeah, exactly. But, I mean, they had some good Florida teams back in the day with Noah and Brewer.
He's won titles.
Yeah, exactly. I think they went back-to-back, to be honest.
Yeah.
But...
No Drake.
But I just... yeah, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to watch, and it'll be fun and then nauseating to hear them talk about KD moving every single day.
It's going to be like the LeBron of 2013 or whatever that was. All right, so that does it. Let's go Eastern Conference, Western Conference Finals real quick.
Okay.
You go first.
If I had to pick, I'd probably say San Antonio, Golden State, Cleveland, Washington.
All right. I got San Antonio and the Utah. I'm just kidding. San Antonio and Golden State's too easy.
I almost wanted to say Houston,
Golden
but
State's
I just
too
can't bet
easy.
against them.
I'm gonna go Memphis.
Okay.
Just to kind of throw a curveball, because the West is so weird. And then Cleveland is obvious. And fuck it, Miami. We're coming. 305. What up? Nah, I don't know. That's my homer pick. My real pick is probably Atlanta or Milwaukee. No. All right. Miami. Fuck it. Miami. Now, like, everyone's getting hurt. Literally, like, the entire team is, like, going to be in
You guys are winning 20.
Car crash.
If you're lucky.
Yeah, right? All right. It's over. On that cheery note, so who's winning the title then? LeBron versus Spurs 5 or whatever it is?
This is... I don't know. I think San Antonio, I guess. I don't want to be like the bandwagon everybody is picking this year, but they're legit. I just think last year was... I don't want to say a fluke, no disrespect to the Clippers, but like it was definitely an anomaly. I think they're going to be back. You got to think this may be the last year for a few of those guys. They're definitely going to go hard.
It seems like Ginobili and Parker are on their last legs.
So, yeah, I don't know. I think the Spurs and maybe the big three and pop right off into the sunset. Maybe.
Yeah, that'd be a nice story.
I doubt it.
That'd be a nice story. I mean, you still got Kawhi and LaMarcus there. Like, why wouldn't you just ride that for a little while longer? I'm gonna go Cavs Spurs, and I think the Cavs win. I think the Spurs are gonna have too much of a fight to get through the West, and I think the Cavs road is just gonna be so much easier.
Cakewalk.
There's I don't see any juggernaut standing in their way. Well, I see...
They could be 12-0 going into the finals.
Yeah,
Let's be honest.
Well, I see, if you get like, it's very possible that the Spurs could get like Oklahoma City, Memphis,
Dude, if they have
Golden
to play
State.
Memphis right there, that
Like,
takes
they
it out.
could have three. They could have those three series back to back, and Cleveland will have Brooklyn, Chicago, Atlanta. Like, it's just not the same. And another level of coaches, another level of players. But I'm excited. Aside from seeing Kobe back, what are you most excited about this season? And then we'll go off on a high note.
Well, yeah, definitely. Number one would be seeing Kobe back. I don't know. It's tough. If I just had to pick like one thing, it's just like all the shakeups that happen, all the different teams. Like there were some big free agent movements. I want to see that Spurs team because they're loaded, and I want to see just Steph Curry continue to be ridiculous and see if they can, defend the title. So I'm definitely just looking forward to the Western Conference.
Yeah, I think the West is just the
Yeah,
answer. Just the West. I want to see Anthony Davis wreck shop. I want to see how good Towns is. I want to see the Durant dynamic. I want to see the Warriors be good. I want to see the Kings be bad.
I want to see Jabari play. If we're talking about just individual players, I definitely want to see him get his chance at his real rookie year.
Yeah, for sure. All right, on that note, we will take it off. We just about hit our mark. So, kudos to us. We really blitzed through that second half. We need to go west first next
definitely.
time. We keep making like annual adjustments to this. So
We'll get it eventually.
the West first next time, and then we'll just blitz through all those bad East teams. So, thank you guys for listening, and